What if you could learn something really complex, like, say, a whole university computer science course, but way, way faster than usual?
Or maybe get fluent in a new language in just a couple of months.
Exactly. It almost sounds like some kind of cheat code, doesn't it?
It really does. And, for a lot of us, it might seem a bit too good to be true. But today we're doing a deep dive into something that's less about magic and more about, well, smart strategy, ultra learning.
Right. It's this intense, self-driven way to pick up hard skills, focusing really hard on speed and actually getting results.
And the material we've got for this dive is fascinating because it doesn't just explain the what. It gives us a pretty detailed roadmap for the how you can genuinely master difficult skills and do it quickly.
Yeah, so our mission today is basically to unpack the main ideas, look at some, frankly, mind-blowing real-world examples, and pull out strategies you can actually use for your own learning goals, whatever they might be.
Think of it as getting you up to speed fast on something that could really change how you approach, well, growing personally and professionally.
Okay, then, let's unpack this.
So to really get why ultra learning is such a big deal now, we kind of need to look at the bigger picture, like the economy. There's this idea from economist Tyler Cowen, average is over.
Average is over. Okay, that sounds significant. What does that actually mean for, us regular folks trying to build a career?
Well, it means that middle ground, economically speaking, is shrinking. MIT economist David Otter talks about skill polarization.
Skill polarization.
Yeah, technology, automation, outsourcing, they're replacing a lot of those medium-skilled jobs. Think about clerks, travel agents, bookkeepers, even many factory roles.
Uh-huh. The jobs that used to be a pretty reliable path to a stable life.
Exactly. Those paths are becoming less certain for a lot of people.
So if middle's shrinking, are the opportunities just at the top and bottom now? Is that the idea?
That's pretty much it. The new jobs tend to be either high-skilled engineers, programmers, managers, data folks, or lower-skilled, like
Oh.
retail, cleaning, care work. And yet, at first glance, that can sound a bit grim. The traditional ladder isn't quite what it used to be.
But hang on, there's another side to this, isn't there? It's not just doom and gloom. It sounds like maybe there's a big opportunity hidden in there too.
Absolutely. That's the crucial part, the ability to learn new valuable skills quickly and effectively. That's moving from nice to have to need to have is becoming almost a survival skill in this new landscape.
And ultralearning is basically a powerful way to respond to that shift, to aggressively learn the skills that are actually in demand.
Precisely. It lets you target the hard skills needed to really thrive.
And, something else I found interesting in the source material was how this connects to education. It points out that even good universities often don't teach the specific practical skills needed for these high-end jobs. Graduates can have these gaps.
Right. And ultra learning can be a way to directly fill those gaps,
Sure.
to get the vocational skills that maybe weren't covered in a traditional degree.
Okay, so let's get into the spirit of ultralearning itself. It seems to boil down to two key things: this real bias towards action and intense focus.
Yeah, those are central.
The story that really jumped out first was Scott Young. This guy learned the entire MIT undergraduate computer science curriculum, like 4 years of material,
And pass the final exams for all of it.
in less than a year, without actually enrolling at MIT.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
He used their open courseware, the free stuff online. And when things were missing, he just figured, okay, I just need to pass the final exams. That's it.
That is pure bias towards action, just finding the most direct route.
Absolutely.
And the author of our main source had his own ultra-learning thing with photography, right? Moved to Scotland, got a camera.
Fell in love with it and just started shooting. No classes, no books initially. He just practiced relentlessly.
Took over 100,000 photos in the first year. That's learning by doing cranked up to 11.
It really is. It perfectly illustrates that directness principle we'll talk more about. But the other piece is focus. You can't do this kind of thing without serious concentration.
Yeah, the example of Mary Somerville was amazing. A 19th century scientist, mathematician.
Brilliant mind. And she managed incredible focus despite constant chaos, raising kids, running a household, visitors dropping in all the time.
I mean, I struggle to focus if someone just sends me a text message.
Right. She was supposedly working through complex geometry in her head, in bed, without a light, and doing botany while breastfeeding.
Her ability to just switch focus on and off like that?
Yeah.
Wow, how do you even start to build that kind of mental muscle?
Well, the source material is pretty honest that just starting to focus is a huge hurdle for many of us. We procrastinate.
Guilty as charged. especially with research or tough problems.
Yeah, the author admits struggling too. It's often about avoiding something uncomfortable or just having a stronger pull towards something easier, like checking email.
Okay, so what can we actually do about it? Are there tactics?
Definitely. For just getting started, there's the 5-minute rule.
Yeah.
Just commit to working on the task for 5 minutes. That tiny commitment often breaks the initial resistance.
Just 5 minutes?
Okay.
I can see that working.
And if you find you're stopping and starting too much with that, you can try the Pomodoro technique. You work intensely for, say, 25 minutes, then take a strict 5-minute break. It structures your focus time.
Right, those timed bursts. And what about sustaining focus for longer?
For many learning tasks, something like 50 minutes to an hour seems to be a good interval. But maybe the biggest thing is being super aware of your environment.
Ah, the distractions.
Exactly. That background TV, the music you think, helps you focus. Often it just makes the unpleasant task feel a bit more bearable while actually hurting your concentration. Multitasking is basically the enemy of ultra-learning. You need deep, undivided attention.
Yeah, trading comfort for actual depth. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads us neatly into the core principles. Let's start with number 3. Directness, go straight ahead.
Yes. Directness is all about applying the skill in the way you'll actually use it, right from the get-go.
So not just learning about it, but actually doing it.
Precisely. It's the opposite of a lot of traditional learning, where you might memorize, say, grammar rules before ever trying to speak, or formulas before tackling real problems. You risk accumulating knowledge you can't actually use.
So even things like language apps, like Duolingo, could be indirect if they don't force you into actual spontaneous speaking.
They can be, yeah. Picking words from a list on an app is very different cognitively from retrieving words yourself in a real conversation under pressure. Think of Benny Lewis, the Fluent in 3 Months guy. His whole approach was hyper-direct. Start speaking the language on day 1, even if you only know 5 words.
That takes guts. And the author's Spain experiment was similar, right? He and a friend just decided Spanish only.
From the moment they landed, they had this awkward first encounter where some people thought they couldn't speak English at all.
Huh, but it worked.
Dramatically. Their Spanish improved way faster than during the previous year of trying partial immersion in France. That no-escape route commitment, forcing constant direct use, was the key.
Designing the environment to demand the skill. Okay. But then principle 4 is drill, attack your weakest points. That sounds like the opposite. How does drilling specific bits fit with that holistic, direct approach?
Good question. It seems like a contradiction, but it's resolved by what the source calls the direct then drill approach. Ultra learners tend to cycle between them. You practice the whole skill directly, figure out where you're weakest, and then you isolate that weak component and drill it intensely. Then you go back to direct practice.
So you alternate. Big picture, then zoom in on the problem areas.
Exactly. It gives you both the real-world context and the targeted improvement.
Can you give an example?
Benjamin Franklin's writing practice is a classic. He didn't just write essays. He'd take essays he admired, jot down the main points, wait a bit, then try to reconstruct the essay in his own words. Then he'd compare his version to the original, see where his vocabulary or structure was weak, and specifically work on those gaps. He even drilled logical arguments.
That's incredibly deliberate. Most of us just write and hope for the best.
Right, he was reverse engineering good writing.
What about skills that are harder to break down, like, say, drawing or painting? How do you drill creativity?
That's where the copycat drill comes in handy. If it's hard to isolate just one part of a creative skill, you can copy the parts you don't want to focus on right now, maybe from another artist or even your own previous work. This frees up your mental energy to laser focus on the specific element you do want to drill. The author did this with drawing, copying poses to focus purely on rendering technique.
That's smart. Okay, principle 5, retrieval, test to learn. This reminds me of that William James quote. Something about recalling from within being better than looking at the book again.
Yes, that captures it perfectly. Actively pulling information out of your memory is a much more potent way to learn than just passively reviewing it, like rereading notes.
And this ties into desirable difficulty. That sounds counterintuitive. We usually want things to be easy.
Does sound odd, doesn't it? But psychologist Ari Bjork's idea is that the harder you have to work to retrieve something successfully, the stronger the memory becomes.
Successfully being the key word there. If it's too hard, you just get frustrated.
Exactly. It has to be difficult, but achievable. So free recall, like trying to remember everything from a lecture without notes, is tougher but better for learning than cued recall, like fill in the blanks. which is better than just recognizing the answer in multiple choice. Even just waiting a short while before testing yourself makes a difference. That little bit of effort strengthens the pathway.
Ramanujan, the mathematician, seems like a perfect example, using that book with theorems but no proofs.
A fantastic example. He had to retrieve, or rather, reconstruct the knowledge himself. He was forced into the deepest kind of retrieval practice, building understanding from the ground up.
And then there's this forward testing effect, where testing yourself actually helps you learn new stuff later. How does that work?
It's pretty amazing. Trying to retrieve information, even if you fail, seems to prime your brain. It's like it prepares the ground, makes you more attuned to finding the answer when you encounter it later. It sets up your attention.
Okay, so practically, how do we build this into our learning? Flashcards.
Flashcards are great, especially for things like vocabulary or definitions paired associations. Spaced repetition systems, those SRS apps, automate the scheduling wonderfully.
Right, the ones that show you the card just before you forget it.
Exactly.
Oh.
But for broader understanding, try free recall. After reading a chapter or watching a video, grab a blank piece of paper and write down everything you remember. It feels hard, but it works.
And the question book method.
That's where you turn your notes into questions you have to answer later. So instead of just passively reviewing notes, you're actively quizzing yourself. Built-in retrieval.
Okay, moving on. Principle 6. Feedback, don't dodge the punches.
This feels obvious, right? You need feedback.
It seems obvious, but the nuance is important. Feedback is just information. More info means more learning potential. The key insight here is that the most useful feedback often comes when you're operating at the edge of your abilities.
Where you might actually fail. Precisely. If success is guaranteed, the feedback, yep, you did it right, doesn't tell you much new. If failure is guaranteed, it's just demoralizing. You learn most when the outcome isn't certain. That sweet spot of difficulty maximizes the information you get from feedback.
So you need to seek out challenges where the feedback actually tells you something meaningful about your performance.
You got it. But all that feedback is useless if you forget it a week later, right?
Which brings us to Principle 7. Retention, don't fill a leaky bucket. Love that image. How do we stop the bucket from leaking?
Well, Daniel Willingham said, memory is the residue of thought. What you think about deeply is what sticks.
So strategies. Spacing seems important.
Crucial. Reviewing material at increasing intervals over time, not cramming. The author used refresher projects to keep his MIT challenge coding skills sharp long after the initial intense period you revisit to reinforce.
And proceduralization, making it automatic.
Yes. This is when knowledge shifts from being something you consciously recall, declarative, to something you just do without thinking, procedural, like typing. You stop thinking about keys. Procedural knowledge is much stickier, more durable. The author's language immersion aimed to proceduralize basic conversation patterns. It becomes second nature.
What about overlearning? Practicing after you've already mastered it.
It sounds inefficient, but practicing beyond initial mastery, especially combined with spacing, makes skills much more resistant to forgetting. It really cements those neural pathways, makes them robust.
And mnemonics, memory tricks, where do they fit?
They can be super useful for specific, dense bits of information, especially early on, like learning anatomy terms or tricky vocabulary, a good bridge. But the source kind of positions them as more of a cool trick than a core strategy for deep conceptual understanding, particularly now we have Google in our pockets. Good for facts, less so for understanding complex systems.
Okay, final principle. Principle 8. Intuition, dig deep before building up. This sounds like going beyond just knowing facts to really getting it.
Exactly. It's about developing that feel for a subject. Like the mathematician Eric Bishop said, do not ask whether a statement is true until you know what it means. Deep understanding first.
Like Richard Feynman, the physicist people called a magician because his understanding seemed so deep, so intuitive.
Right. He wasn't just applying formulas. He had this profound grasp. And part of developing that intuition, interestingly, is often about unlearning.
Unlearning.
Yeah. Once you know the basics, further progress often involves shedding inefficient methods or assumptions you picked up earlier, finding simpler, more elegant ways to think or solve problems, stripping things down.
And it also involves experimenting with the learning process itself, finding what works for you.
Absolutely. It's about actively trying different resources.
Yeah.
Which books click, which online courses work, which teachers explain things well for you, and different techniques for different topics, and even developing your own personal style within the skill, whether it's coding, writing, or art. It's a meta-level experimentation.
The Van Gogh example was great here. Trying an idea, hitting it hard, then moving on, exploring something else, maybe coming back later with new insight.
That cycle of intense work and broad exploration seems key to building that deep intuitive understanding. Learning about learning, really.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of powerful ideas. So, for someone listening who's thinking, right, I want to try this, what are the practical first steps? How do you actually implement an ultra learning project?
Step one is crucial. Research and define your project. Be specific. Not just learn Japanese, but maybe learn enough Japanese to handle basic tourist interactions in Tokyo. Narrow the scope initially.
Makes sense. And benchmark, see how others did it successfully.
Definitely. Look at university courses, online guides, forums. Find pathways that worked. And the expert interview method is golden. Talk to someone who's already achieved what you want to achieve. Get their advice, vet your plan.
How much research is enough, though? Avoid getting stuck planning forever.
Good point. Analysis paralysis. The suggestion is about 10% of your total estimated project time. So for a 100-hour project, spend maybe 10 hours planning. Enough to get direction, not enough to stall indefinitely.
Okay, 10%. Then step two.
Schedule your time. Obvious, but critical. Decide upfront how much time you can realistically commit, whether it's full-time for a month or just an hour every day. Then actually block it out in your calendar. Make it real.
Consistency is king here, I imagine.
Absolutely. A regular schedule builds the habit, makes it easier to start each time, reduces the mental effort. If it's not scheduled, it's too easy for life to push it aside.
And finally, step three, review your results.
Yes, after the project, or even at milestones during it, take time to reflect. What worked well, what didn't? Where did you struggle? The author mentions a Korean project that wasn't as successful because he relied too much on textbooks, not enough direct practice. Learning from those failures is just as important as celebrating successes.
So it's okay if a project doesn't go perfectly. The analysis is part of the learning process itself.
Exactly. You're not just learning the skill, you're learning how you learn best. It's a continuous improvement cycle.
Before we wrap up, a couple of other important points came up. One was about competition.
Right. Comparing yourself to others can be tricky. It can motivate you if you're doing well, like the Polgar sisters in chess. But it can also be demotivating if you feel you're lagging behind. The advice, maybe start with a project that's harder to compare directly. Build some confidence first, then maybe tackle something more competitive later on. Choose your comparisons carefully.
Good advice. And the last point, make learning a priority. How do we actually do that in our busy lives?
Often, learning is just a side effect of work or a hobby. Ultra learning suggests trying fusion projects, activities that achieve a real goal, but are also explicitly designed to teach you something specific. Learning becomes a primary objective, not just an accidental byproduct. You engineer opportunities to learn while doing things that matter to you.
Weaving learning into the fabric of what you do. Well, this has been fascinating. We've covered so much ground. The why behind ultra learning in today's world, the core spirit of action and focus, and those powerful principles. Directness, drill, retrieval, feedback, retention, and intuition.
Now, we saw how people like Scott Young, Mary Somerville, even Van Gogh embodied these ideas, achieving incredible things through focused, self-directed learning.
The landscape is definitely changing, and being able to learn effectively and quickly feels more critical than ever.
Absolutely. The tools and strategies are out there. We've unpacked a lot of them today.
So the final thought for you listening, the knowledge is now yours. What hard skill, what ambitious project have you been putting off? How could you maybe use some of these ultra learning ideas to tackle it, to engineer your own success, and really thrive in whatever comes next?